right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Tempered Leadership. I'm your host, Eric Rieger, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by my good friend, John Costello, the CEO of Cherry's Industrial out of Elk Grove Village, Illinois. John, welcome to the show.
Eric, thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be with you.
Well, we'll check in at the end of the show and see if you're still thrilled. No, it's always great to catch up with you. You and I have known each other probably almost a couple of years now, I think. And our introduction came from our mutual coach in the open book world, Kevin Walter. So we've kind of attended a few of the open book gatherings, as they're called, the annual conferences. And I remember the first time I met you, we were not scheduled to meet. I was meeting with one of your team members and just happened to talk. And like 10 minutes into the conversation, felt like, like here's a kindred spirit. Like we could have been brothers, we could have been best friends growing up. So let's talk a little bit about your journey with Cherry's, because you've been there 24 years. You're the CEO, but you didn't always have that title. You started and kind of worked your way up into ownership.
Yeah. So interesting. This just came up here recently. My introduction to the company was through my wife. So I was in sales. I was out of work, and my wife was working with another person. And at the time we were dating. And so the long and the short of it was, hey, what does your boyfriend do? And she said, hey, he's looking for a job. She goes, oh, by the way, my husband owns a company, and they're looking for a salesperson. So I interviewed. It was kind of an awkward interview. It was one of those moments where it was like, are you adding an additional person, or are you letting somebody go? And he said, well, we're letting somebody go as the doors open and the walls are paper thin. And I said, does this person know this yet? And he goes, he does now. So I started as the assistant. I wasn't even a salesperson. It was the assistant to the nephew of the man that owned the company. And so when I started there, it was just 4 people, and it was a real interesting company. I mean, the products that they sold were amazing. The customers that they had were amazing, but the workplace was really weird. It was kind of toxic. It wasn't very supportive. And I remember when I was that first year, I was like, man, I don't know if they like me or they're going to fire me tomorrow. I mean, there was just like no in between. And so, yeah, I kind of made my way through the company. And as the owner, Bud, said, he said, you always have to make yourself useful enough that I won't fire you. And so I became kind of the jack of all trades, expert of none. But I had the staying power. And one thing that I always remember, I was the sort of person, and I don't know if I was wired that way, or maybe it was just the environment of just always wanting to help other people out. And there was nothing in it for me. It wasn't like I was doing this to move the company forward. It was just, I looked at that other person struggling and said, how do I help them out? How can I be more purposeful in what I'm doing on a daily basis? And so I went from the junior guy into a sales position, into a management position. And then I was offered up some stock, really more like phantom equity. And really kind of at that point in time, I had no idea what it was or even what it looked like to be an owner, because everything was hidden. I mean, nothing was shared with anybody. And I know you've heard this story, but I'll share it with the group. The owner sat down with me, and he showed me the income statements and the balance sheet. And I was like, what am I looking at? There's numbers everywhere, right?
I still feel like that today.
Me too. And so we're going through this, and we get to a certain spot, and I said, what is this? I said, you show marketing fee here. And I said, like, I took an accounting class way back when. And I said, it looks like you're double capturing some costs here. So you're capturing some marketing, under our COGS, which is kind of unique. And then, you're capturing it as an expense. And he said, well, really the stuff in COGS, they said, we're not really doing that. It just kind of gets placed on there because I really don't want the salespeople to see what the true number is. And at that point in time, I said, the true number, I don't understand. I mean, don't you want the sales team to know exactly what it costs? They're really profit driven. And if their commissions are based on profitability, what difference does $100 make? He goes, well, it makes a difference for me. And I was trying to say it should make a difference for them.
Yeah.
And I love the man. He was my mentor, great person. But he did say, he said, look, when you own the company, he said, you can run it however you want. He said, this is how I'm running the company. And he didn't say it mean or nasty or anything, but he was just kind of an old school guy. And so then the fast forward from that is, he was near retirement, and he approached me and his nephew and said, hey, look, I'm gonna sell the company. I'd rather sell it to you guys than to take it to a third party. And so he came up with a number, and we're like, that number doesn't equal any multiples. It doesn't make any sense. He goes, I know, but this is the number, and you should be able to cash flow it. Just go and get bank financing. He did say one of the requirements, though, is he said, look, in order for me to sell it to both of you guys, you have to be 50-50 partners. And, at that point in time, I was like, 50-50 partner. I mean, I went from 0 to 50%. This is awesome. How bad could it be, right? And my partner took it the other way, where, look, he felt like he was the anointed one, and not in a bad way, but, hey, this is his uncle. And why is his uncle doing this to him? So really kind of from that moment forward, we got into disputes. He wanted to run it as a lifestyle company like his uncle did, which wasn't a bad thing. I really wanted to run it for growth. I mean, for me, it was always, somebody had told me, run your business like you're going to sell it someday, right? So, don't stuff the expenses, try and do it to where there's not all these ad backs when you go to sell the company. And so that really kind of stuck in my head of, let's run it for a 5X or a 4X or a 3X multiple whenever we're ready to sell it, instead of taking the money today. Let's reinvest it back. And my partner didn't really kind of believe in that. So it was about 7 years where we kind of fought it back and forth. And eventually we just didn't see eye to eye. And there's a longer story around it, but, I bought him out. I mean, it got contentious, and it was either he was going to buy me out, or I was going to buy him out, or we were going to sell to a third party, or to hire lawyers. And I bought him out, and the number was kind of ridiculous. I mean, I thought it was really skewed in his favor. A lot of people gave me some guidance of, hey, look, just buy him out and you'll see a big difference. And I just couldn't get over that. I think a negotiation, I always felt like in a negotiation, a good negotiation is when both sides feel like they're not getting an equitable deal. And I felt that I wasn't getting an equitable deal. I don't know what he was feeling. So maybe it was a good negotiation at the end of the day. And really kind of from that point on, it was just me running the show. And it was a lot easier just to kind of point the company in a direction instead of in two different directions. And, the toxic workplace that was there, we had to let a bunch of people go. I mean, it was really hard. We just said, look, you're not part of of where we're heading. We had some people that left and started a competing company, and we thought, oh my God, this is going to be really bad and awful and terrible. And, I realized that it is hard to kill a company. It's not that like I was trying.
You do have to put some effort into it.
Yeah.
if you want to kill it.
Yeah. But really the rest of the story for me was really the point where I got to make a decision about really, the most important part of the company, which is the people portion of it. And I had, years ago, I had bumped into, I didn't know Kevin Walters. I knew his brother, Larry. Larry was the operations guy of the three brothers. And this is back probably 8 or 9 years ago, just as they were beginning their journey with open book management. I had gone to their building to see it. I was in a peer group, and Larry was like, hey, dude, you got some problems. All you talk about is how bad the culture in your company is. It's like, you should really come and see what we're doing. It's pretty cool. And I remember walking in, I remember seeing their huddle and just thinking to myself, gosh, why can't we do this? Why can't we do this? I remember bringing it back to my partner when he was still there, and he's kind of shook his head of like, we're never going to share the numbers. Why would we share the numbers?
Right.
And so then when he was completely out of the plan, I remembered back to that. I'd been reading the book, and I probably like you, I read a lot of business books, and I always kind of try and soak them in and then bring them back to work and try and implement them. But the great game of business, it always kind of stuck with me. It just made total sense. And the other thing too is like my story is similar to Jack's story. I mean, they were leveraged far higher than we were, but it was still that same thing of the financial side of it. So I'd gone like 3 years, and there's a point in time we changed accountants, and because the other accountant was, my partner's accountant. So I'll never forget this. The accountant came in, and we're going through the books, and I said, I'm just curious, if you're going to give us a letter grade, based on the finances of the company right now, what would you give us? And he said, you want me to be honest? I said, please do. He said, a D minus. It was like a D minus. Holy cow. I thought we were doing well. Revenues were tracking higher, but we just weren't making any money.
Yeah.
And so at that point in time, it was like, hey, John, you gotta make some serious choices here. And the choice for me was really, I had to tell the story. Only myself and the accounting manager and the accountant, only 3 people in the whole organization knew that we were a D minus and we're running out of cash quick. And so, I was going to self-implement. I hired a coach, and that was probably the toughest decision I've ever made. Was doing it. Looking back, it was the best decision I ever made. But
sure.
But it was the hardest, to try and get in front of 20 people and say, "Hey, guess what? The company's not doing great financially." And I was waiting for people to rush out the door, and there were some good moments in there where people. I'll never forget this. One of the guys said, as we were going through, he's part of our design team, and said. He said, all right, John, so what happens if we pay down debt faster? And I was like, wow, okay. So it's just not me in this journey. Other people really want to know what they could do to actually make a difference. So it was really empowering.
Well, an optimist could have presented it as, okay, look, we're a D, but that's the 4th letter of the alphabet. There's 26. So I mean, exactly. we only got 3 letters to improve, and we're golden.
Right, exactly.
Well, you've given some really good nuggets here. I mean, like the first thing was when you interviewed for the job initially, how not to interview people with the door open. And
exactly.
That's not how you spring on to the people who are actually going to be leaving through the interview of the replacement. So that's number one. Right. But I think the partnership journey that you've had, like when you and I first talked about that. It's really important, especially if there's ownership stake involved, that you're on the same page in terms of, we're not here to judge whether a lifestyle business is the right choice or not, but, people like us, we're wired for transparency. Yeah. So if you are going to have a lifestyle business, it's just better to tell everybody who works for you, when I'm done with the company, I'm either going to sell it or just close it down, because this is just to support the life I want. And that's okay, because there are people out there who in their life, in their journey, they don't want to, entwine themselves with an organization. Their purpose is not to be part of something bigger with an organization. And there's jobs for people that want that, and then they do something else in other parts of their life. So it's not that we're saying it's right or wrong. It's just from how we're wired and on our belief systems is that people have a right to know, and they should know that. And I had some struggles when we first went down the journey to open the books and teach people the financial literacy, because, like yourself, it's not like everything was a pretty picture, and I was still trying to figure some things out myself. So one of the challenges leaders have a lot of times, in the early stages of leadership journey, is they feel like they have to know all the answers, which is, as we get better at this, we realize, no, the job is to build more leaders and find other people who have answers, create an environment for innovation and people being able to speak up. And if you find that you're the smartest person in the room, that's usually when you've done something wrong. And fortunately for me, there's it's not hard to not be the smartest person in the room, because there's way more. There's a plethora of people out there who are way smarter than me, so I have a big basket to choose from. But getting a clear picture, a clear vision, the transparency, I mean, that's changed your culture. It's done a 180 there, right? I mean, you've had it's night and day from when you first started there and when you had a partner. Talk a little bit about what that's been like in terms of perspective from a leader, being able to sort of empower people with the knowledge or the lack of knowledge, just to say, this is where we're at with things right now.
Yeah.
How has that helped?
Yeah, I mean, we're still working our way through the journey, but it was really I think the culture was really kind of a top down, command control. It was like, just tell people what to do. And then, I mean, we had some people here that actually they had bats in their office, and I know it was a joke, but they would always kind of pull the bat out. And I was like, put the bat away. I mean, that's not going to do anything. I mean, that was a little bit of the culture. And it was like, people are not going to they're not going to be creative. They're not going to feel empowered. And we're still working on it, because, in that financial journey of trying to get the company, solvent and really in a good spot, it was still the same thing, of like, hey, we're looking up to John to kind of guide us. And it's really been over maybe the past year that we're really focusing on, all right, let's let people really kind of make decisions. If they fail, they're not doing it on purpose. They didn't wake up in the morning and on the way to work say, hey, I'm going to fail, or I'm going to do something to cause, some damage to the company. So we're really focusing on that portion. The leadership side of it, that's really important too. We were a very flat organization. I don't know if you were the same way, Eric. And so, we didn't have leadership in place. And so it was, everything kind of was looking at, one or two people. And now we have leaders, that in another organization would be called managers. And then we have other leaders that really kind of on a daily, weekly basis are the people that will raise their hand during a huddle and say something, or, come up to you and say, hey, I noticed this, or can you tell me more about this? I wasn't sure what this financial term meant. And that, to me, that's another great leader, of just really being that interested and that invested in the company. That's remarkable. I mean, those are the things that almost get you to tear up, when it's somebody that so unexpectedly, comes to you and says, hey, I really don't know what this term means. What does break even mean? I was embarrassed to raise my hand in front of the group, but,
Yeah.
and it's the guy who's maybe driving a forklift or doing assembly out in the shop floor. And that's really so powerful that they're asking those questions. And that you have an organization that they can ask those questions.
That's the important part, is that you've created that safe environment where people they're not afraid to ask questions, because A, they know they're going to get an honest answer, whether it's I know or I don't know. But B, there's not going to be any repercussions for, like you had mentioned, the previous owner, when you're kind of manipulating the numbers because you don't trust people. If you don't have trust in the organization, I mean, that's going to make for some really long days, because people just aren't going to be operating at their peak, no matter how much they try. If you don't have people trusting one another, like the person to your left or your right or behind you or in front of you, if you can't trust that they're going to do their job and you can't trust the data, it's got to feel like almost like a helpless situation. You have no chance to succeed in your role, even if you give it your best effort, because you're operating under false assumptions or with inaccurate data, or the person next to you might be trying to undercut you because, they're trying to get the extra $5 out of the deal or what have you. So yeah, we definitely had some culture challenges as well with this. And that was one of the things when we first started teaching the open book, is, the people from the Great Game that came out is, you can expect, somewhere between 10 and 30% of the people are going to just opt out and leave because this accountability and transparency model isn't what they signed up for when they joined your organization, and you're now transforming things. And there's nowhere to hide in a company like that. I mean, that to me, that's a great thing, is because we go through the numbers every week and people are accountable to this. If something's off, people have to own it. And it's okay. I mean, we're not trying to get them to own it so that we can chastise them or talk down to them or yell at them. It's so we can fix the problems. You
Right.
can't fix what you don't know is broken. And then we all learn in the process. So that's, for us, that's been the fun part of the journey is the culture cleansing, having people step up. And you mentioned, it can be an emotional experience. Like you and I had an emotional moment 10 minutes into our first conversation, because we just care about the people that much. I mean, it's really why we do this. And that's an important part of, for me, of being a leader and teaching other people to be leaders, is you have to take a step back for a minute and remember it's all about the people, whether it's the clients you're serving or the people who work, in the organization and put in the blood, sweat, and tears day to day. The other stuff, together we can figure it out. But if you don't have the people and if you don't have the hearts and minds committed to it, nothing else matters. I mean, it's going to be a struggle.
Yeah, we went through an exercise this past year where it was, again, at one of our meetings, and I did the first introduction. I said, yeah, look, I started the company X years ago, and I said, this is how I started the company, and I knew nothing about pallet inverters, which is the product that we manufacture. And I said, I thought I was going to be at the company for 3 months, and here I am X years later, right? We go to the next person. The next person had been at the company 20 years. His story was he worked at Kinko's. The owner saw him, said, hey, looks like you're a hard worker. Come work for me, right? As you got through all 20 people, everybody was like a second chance at a new career, and it was really kind of an amazing thing. Maybe not for them, but for me, it was an amazing thing of just listening to everybody's story, right? And at the end of it, you begin to think, that's the sort of company that you want, right? That we all found our purpose in life. We all found that maybe, today's a good day, tomorrow is a not so good day, but we all support each other, right? We all truly care about what we do. And the company that they worked at before was not a good fit for some reason, right? But collectively, us as a team, can really accomplish some great things. And those are the sort of reminders as an owner that you sometimes you can get lost. You're so focused on, well, this happened or this happened or this happened, and sometimes it's just good to get back to that reminder of where you started and then other people's journeys. And then the most important thing for me is the journey's not over. What is the journey going to look like for them? So that really is kind of my thing now is what is the transition for the company, whether it's 5 years, 10 years from now, and how do all those people that were on that journey to begin with, how are they cared for, right? So that's
well, we're always in a state of transition.
Right.
Business is not static. Nothing ever stays still. And it's interesting when you're talking about going around the room and having everybody tell their story. That's something that I've been thinking about is as we continue to grow, and before it was kind of like a little bit of a revolving door problem, and now it's not so much a revolving door. It's just more people are coming in the door, and there's more people in the company. And you start to, after a year goes by, you're like, hey, some of these people don't have the origin story, and they don't know the stories of the other people in the room. So having one of those campfire sessions where everybody tells their story, and you're right. The first time it was great for you because you're hearing all that, and then people are like, yeah, it's about time somebody asked me about my story. The chance that somebody actually cared, and like you're saying, they're telling it, and they might not be interested because they already know their story, but the fact that somebody actually wants to hear it and wants to understand, I think you can make a lot of connections in the business. Like I don't think you're ever going to get 100% buy-in at where everybody's at the same level of commitment and the roots are planted deep. But the more you do those types of things to show people that, hey, I recognize you as a human. I recognize the needs you have. And I was talking on another episode about there's a book by Chip Connolly called Peak, and it talks about Maslow's hierarchy of needs in building your culture. And I definitely take a look at that all the time, because the bottom two parts of the period have to do with the basics, like food and shelter. And, like if you're not meeting, if people aren't being met at those levels, trying to create an environment for them, to excel. And no matter what you do, if people are hungry or they're thirsty or they don't have a place to live, or there's job insecurity, like if they're worried about losing their job, they're certainly going to be more apt to make mistakes or not speak up or things like that. So as leaders, it's our job to create those spaces. And I think it's great that you guys, did that. And, we're trying to figure out ways, because this is kind of a segue into the next talking point about this pandemic. I know you and I occasionally have chats. I guarantee there wasn't any conversation we had in 2019 about prepping for the pandemic that was going to hit us in 2020. So what have you guys had to do? The word of the year, I bet, when we're done with this, Webster's is going to say pivot has been the most overused word now for every company. What have you guys had to do to change and pivot and deal with your culture challenges being separated a little bit?
Yeah. So, in 19, there was a number of conversations that we had with our sales team and with other people about working remote. And yeah, you just could kind of see it coming, where, some people were making long commutes and just weren't really effective. And they're like, if we're really building this company and this culture where it's all about trust, then why would you let me work from home, right? Made perfect sense. So we started to talk about it, and just the year kind of got away from us. And again, we were still kind of top down, and it was myself and leadership, and there was some back and forths on it. And so then when we got to March, we weren't ready. I mean, we were absolutely not ready. And at that point in time, we went from 0 to 100 of everybody working remote. So there was some technology issues that we had talked about. The good news for us is that we haven't really seen a significant drop in revenues. So our team was ready. They were committed. We only missed one huddle. So that was really our lifeline. But I think just to a person, everybody would sit there, and if you asked individually, they would all say the best thing that we did was doing open book management, because it actually prepared us for an event like this, just because we could talk about anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
The lines of communication were open. Nothing was either off the table. So and you could have serious conversations of like, this is what happens when we get to DEFCON 4, right? Mm-hmm. This is what happens when we run out of cash. This is what happens if we've got a big backlog, but if we burn through the backlog. So all those things were important. I think that the pivot really for us was we lost a couple of people, but I think we would have lost a couple of people anyways, because they just weren't committed to it. So really the pivot was working remote, and then just really trying to figure out of how to keep things, communication and social collisions. These are terms that I think a lot of people have heard. So much was missing when you're not, around a water cooler and being able to talk, or, just, the ladies like to eat lunch together. I mean, there was just all of these things that people just really, really miss. And so our huddles for us were really kind of a lifeline, where they become a little bit more stale now, but early on, like March, February, May, people were looking forward to it. I mean, the first 10 minutes, we actually had to say, look, we have to start our meeting, because the first 10 minutes they wanted to talk, like, hey, how are you doing? How's so-and-so? We miss you, this, and this, right? And
we call that our rabbit hole. That's our rabbit hole time. People get in, they just start diving into things that have nothing on the agenda about them. But, again, because you're missing that kitchen time, the hallway
Right,
time.
right.
And it's for us, I mean, especially with like things like our help desk, when they're all in the same room together and you're taking calls, I mean, you're focused on your work, but you can't help but overhear other things that are going on.
Yeah.
And I think that was a key part of our collaboration is, somebody would hear something, go, oh, I talked to her last week and here's what I did. Why is that back again? It sparks other conversations that result in good outcomes for clients. And it's like, now you have to be a lot more intentional to be like, because you're not hearing any of those other conversations and you're really only seeing what's on your screen. So we've done things like virtual happy hours and stuff like that. And we're now trying to coordinate a virtual happy hour with another IT company that we're friends with, because we've done outings before, like we've gone Top Golf and things like that. And those are the bonding things, like, especially when you can share time away with your peers, in the same industry, or, for us, like you and I, there's certain things we just, even though you're in a transparent environment, having a conversation with your team about it, they just can't relate because they're not in the position.
Yeah.
They don't understand the stresses. So it's good to have those networks, but it's still, I got to tell you, it's still not the same. And I question, like, I think it was Nationwide Insurance came out, like a month after this all started and said, we're shutting our offices down. We're permanently going to remote work. And I was like, holy cow, that's a knee-jerk reaction to this. I mean, yeah, the pandemic, we're probably going to be in till at least mid next year, if not till the end of 2021, before this really kind of gets resolved to the point we can go back to somewhat normal. To make a decision, a kind of a life-changing decision, I think it was pretty short-sighted on their part. Technology can help us do those things for sure. Like, remote work is, and especially in our company, we've been telling people, here are some efficiency gains and things like that. But I think we're going to start to see the impact on the human element of it as companies, like, especially we get into another year of this. It's tough just being isolated in your own home, and that separation of work and home life. People, it's gonna take some mental tolls. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I think it's going to have an impact on mental health.
Yeah. I mean, we're a little different because we're manufacturing, so we're back to having people back at the office, but it's still tough. You're masked up. You still really can't spend time with each other.
No
You know,
hugging.
Yeah, no hugging, no fist bumps, nothing like that. The celebrations are a little bit different. I think there's, people are going through a lot of mental health issues, including myself, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it is taxing every day to go through the same routine. I mean, it is really, really hard. So if it's hard for me, it's got to be hard for other people, right? And uh, so if you said, look, is there going to be an effect? Absolutely. I mean, at some point in time, I mean, the human body is not designed for this. The human brain is not designed for this, right?
Yeah.
So we're a little bit different than most, that, we still have where people walk through the hallway and say hello, and you can't see their smiling face, but that they're smiling behind their mask, right?
Well, that's an important distinction, because, while you're able to be together in a certain capacity, I think the mental health aspect of those people is, you don't know what's in anybody's mind about how much they actually believe the seriousness of the pandemic, because
Right.
depending on what channel you turn on or who you talk to, it's either a hoax, non-existent, or it's the end of the world. Somewhere in the middle there is pretty much where we need to be, is like, yes, this is serious. There's a pretty good chance, if you don't have pre-existing conditions or in a certain group, you're probably not going to die, but there's no guarantees. That's, even if you're in an environment with other people, that's got to weigh on your mind too. Like, how safe am I here at this environment? And so
Right.
people like you and I have had to scramble and figure out, like, it's not that we didn't have safe environments before, but now we've had to learn about infection control and virus transmission and social distancing and masking up and PPE. And, so, I mean, I would assume you guys there's a component to the mental health aspect, even with the people who are able to be together.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's better now, but there was, we first asked people to come back and return to work, I mean, there was a lot of fear around it.
Mm-hmm.
And, we scrubbed the place and we were disinfecting daily and we bought a fogger and we did all those things. But still, it was really a tough thing, I mean, as an owner, you're sitting there saying the employees are the most important people, you don't have a company without them, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to kind of take that and weigh it against, well, we still have to generate cash, right? So
Right.
how do we do this, right?
That's a close second. If you don't have cash, you might have
Right.
great people, but you're going to have to figure out something else for them because
Right.
there's
So
no place for them to come to.
that was the mental anguish that I had to go through, is like, how, and if somebody says, John, I don't think you care. And I go, of course I care. You guys don't realize how much I care, but it's like a 1A and a 1B, because you have to keep the company going and you have to generate cash. And in our situation, people have to manufacture the equipment that we sell. So you have to have a support group around it. And I think slowly they began to understand how serious we were and how serious it took. And then everybody else around had to be serious about it as well. And we just said, look, the people that can still work remote, we're going to let them work remote because it makes sense. We just don't want to bring everybody back because that's an unsafe condition. But there's just a certain group of people that we said, if you're turning wrenches, you can't do that virtually. You still have to come in and turn wrenches. And we're going to do everything to make sure you're safe.
Yeah, we haven't figured out the technology on that yet. So
No,
those
right,
those jobs
right.
those jobs are safe for at least another decade or two.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and again, these are the types of, just the central theme of this podcast is about leadership. And, so like there's I think Small Giants had posted something on this the other day about imposter syndrome that leaders go through sometimes, where you get to a heavy situation or you get to a point where you just wonder if you're like, how are people relying on me? Who am I to be in this position of like, I'm making, almost life or death decisions. And, so now you have to deal with your own insecurities about, okay, everybody's looking to me. What are we going to do in a crisis like this? And so for me, it's like, I just started turning to the professionals, and the first thing we did is communicate to our clients. We pulled our people out of the field like 7 weeks early. And I found some N95 masks in my basement from a painting project I had done a while ago. And I just said, if we have to go in the field, I'll go. Not knowing, what kind of risk I was putting on myself either, because I'm like, okay, well, if it comes down to them or me, at least if I do it, it's like nobody can point the finger and say, you put me in a bad spot.
Yeah.
And looking back on it, I'm not saying that was the right or wrong situation, but that's how I chose to deal with it, is okay, until we get a better handle on what the risks are. And, one of the first places I visited, they wound up closing down 3 weeks later because they had a mass COVID infection. And so people were like, holy cow, you could have sent us there, but you didn't. And, I think those are just examples of, it wasn't like I thought I was smarter than everybody else. It was just, I don't have the answer. So I'm going to default to putting it on my shoulders, because that's what leadership is. And, some of the books you talk about being a reader, some of the books that I've read, I'm a big Patrick Lencioni fan. There's a book he's got about, it talks about from a leadership perspective. This was like a big change for me in thinking, is I thought as we grew the business and we got bigger and we had more people and more seats, my job would get easier because those hats would start coming off my head. Like when you're a small business and you like your sales, your marketing, some part of operations, some part of finance,
Mm-hmm.
you have, and all these things that I'm terribly underqualified to do, but thank God for Google and for a friend network, you figure some of these things out until smarter people can get in the roles. And so my thought process early on was like, man, I can't wait till we're 20 people and I don't have to do anything other than sell. And so we're there. And it's like, my job's harder now than it was when we were 5 people or 10 people. And that was Lencioni's message, is that, yeah, the bigger you get, the more responsibility you take on, the more your job's going to suck. And you have to kind of embrace that, where you're going to be the one having the most difficult conversations with people. And that's your new challenge, is that you have to relish that. And so I'm still getting comfortable with the thought process of the more success we have and the bigger we get, the worse it's going to get for me in terms of responsibility. And this pandemic was a perfect eye opener to that, because you're forced into a spotlight of making a decision that's going to impact everybody in the company. And, it's not like we were trained for this. I mean, I don't know about you, but in my background, infectious disease control was not a class I ever took.
Yeah, we're a very sales-centric company, and so with sales, you always have strategies, and we always had like an A and a B and a C and a true fallback, right? From there. And so with this, there was really no A, B, and C, because every single day the rules changed. I mean, you
Right.
would think you had it figured out, and then there would be guidance from OSHA, or guidance from CDC or the Illinois Department of Public Health, and so it just kept changing, or the governor's office, whatever it was. And so you'd have A in place, and then you think about B and C, and hoping that you never got there. We're kind of on that spot now, where because of those decisions, it did, like you said, responsibility did kind of push some of the responsibilities back to me as I was trying to offload. Because it in a crisis, you try and go to your employees or your leadership and say, okay, what do we do? And they're all kind of like, well, I don't know. I mean, this is uncharted ground. So you're trying to be collaborative, but still at the end of the day, somebody has to say, okay, this is the ruling on it, right?
Yeah.
What I've had to really kind of force myself to do, and this has really been over the past couple of months, is other decisions. As people would come to me, I would have to say, hey, look, if you're looking for advice, I'm not going to give advice. If you're looking for a sounding board, I can be the sounding board. Because if you come to me looking for advice, I'm going to go that path, that I did, in crisis, which means John takes over. And that's not really the culture that we're trying to do. If you want me to be a sounding board, which is ideal, I mean, as an owner, as a leader, if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I'm going to do A, B, or C. Let me walk you through. I tried this. I thought about this. I did this. So it's like, if you agree, go execute. If you don't agree, then you kind of walk through it, right? And then if you agree, then you go execute. That is so amazing as an owner when that happens. You're like,
right.
Okay, I don't have to take that on, right? And that's what you don't want to do as you grow. You want to be able to work on the business and not to be thrust into the daily grind, which you don't have the throughput to do it, or the mental capacity to do that and think about everything else.
Well, you hit a wall at some point, and it's not scalable after that. If you don't build it intentionally, where that the decision making is spread out, and you're empowering people to, like, here are the guideposts. We've talked on this show a lot about core values being, if you have good core values and they're part of your DNA, you can tell people, like, look, if you get to a spot and you need to make a decision, there's your guidepost right there. As long as you're following the core values, you're never going to go wrong. Now, will you make a bad choice every once in a while? Yeah, we're all human. I mean, I don't know about you, but my track record's not anywhere close to probably even 60%, much less 80, 90, 100%. But if you have those core values, you can at least say, you can at least coach people then and say, okay, help me understand the mindset when you made this choice relative to the guideposts, and then you might find things like, wow, these guideposts aren't really in our DNA as much as I thought they were, or people don't understand them, or they have a different perspective on the same thing. And then that's part of, again, leadership and how you help the company grow. So yeah, you're right. In times like this, having I don't know how companies who are that very top down, like I've been stressed through this whole thing. I can't even imagine what that must be like, the weight on the shoulders of people who are just, command and control and telling people what to do. And, there's got to be so many other things going through your head every day. At least we know we're in this together with our teams.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So what other things have you learned over the course of your journey here from sales guy to owner and CEO, that you think would be helpful to people either just starting out or getting into the leadership journey? Little nuggets that you've learned, or things, sayings, books, anything that's helpful to people as they're trying to figure their path out.
Well, I mean, a couple of books so like Good to Great was one of the first books that I read that really kind of hit me. And one of the things I remember around that, and hopefully it's the book I'm thinking of, is figure out who's going to be on the bus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who's driving the bus. And then if you've got really good people, then, you may have to kind of move them around, on a chair on a bus. And as I was going through that first part of the journey, that's what I realized right away, is that we weren't hiring the right people. We just weren't hiring the people that kind of believed in what we believed in, whether you call it a guidepost or a core value. And then really, obviously, the next book that I read was The Great Game of Business, and then Small Giants was after that. And so really all these stories together as a leader, for my journey, nobody really taught me how to be a leader. It's like nobody teaches you how to be a parent, right?
Right.
I mean, you could read all these books, but until you're kind of thrust into it, you don't, how do you prepare? And so usually it's somebody takes you and mentors you. And so my mentorship was a little bit different, right? And it wasn't this idea of being a purposeful leader, just somebody that really kind of, cares about their well-being, the love that's in the room, and love towards, their journey. And so for the Great Game of Business, I mean, it really kind of came together, this idea of, as a leader, is the first thing is to be vulnerable. And so me, and I've made it through this whole podcast without tearing up, and that's pretty remarkable for me.
We're not done yet. We're not done yet.
Is the vulnerable side of it is just willing to, like you say, is that you don't have all the answers. And I think so many leaders were maybe brought up the other way of, you have to show that you're tough. You have to show that you have mettle. Somebody used to say to me, you need to be like a duck on the water. And I used to say, what the hell does that mean? Moving and steady, above the surface and kicking like crazy underwater, right? And I always thought to myself, well, that's crazy. Why would I do that? Right?
Yeah. Seems kind of inefficient.
Right. If I'm struggling that bad, I mean, find somebody to get me out of the water, right?
Yeah. Ducks have wings. Shouldn't you just fly if you're having
exactly right. Right. So I mean, if you start to look at that, and so those are those common sense things that really made sense as you start to read these books, is that it's okay to show a vulnerable side. It's okay to be transparent. It's okay to tell people that you don't have all the answers. It's okay to tell people that maybe the company's not doing well financially. It's okay to ask for help from the bottom, and hopefully the bottom up, not the top down. It's hard to turn it around, though. I mean, if you're so used to doing it X, I think the other thing that I kind of learned through this is it's about progress, not perfection, and that's a tough thing too. Whereas a business owner, you're trying to be perfect in front of everybody, right? Because you constantly feel like you're being judged. But as a group, you're never going to be perfect. As long as people are progressing, right, and they're learning something, that is the thing that, when I started at the company, and I kind of forgot that, is the learning was the best part of it. The supporting others was the best part of it, right? That's the reason why I enjoyed going to work, right? And so you want to build a company that people feel the same way. They love to learn. They love to support each other, and if they're supporting each other, the customer experience is going to be phenomenal. Everybody gets stuck into this whole idea of customer's the king. The customer's the most important thing. I think it's a fallacy. And even if my customers are listening to this, I would say it's a fallacy. You have to make sure that your people are happy, because if they're happy, it's going to show to the customer. Like, you got to be the same people, when the phone is answered and you're talking to them, as to when you hang up the phone, right?
Right.
So If you're like, oh, we love you, and then you hang up, son of a jerk, oh, I can't believe that, right? Something's wrong. It should be the same. You should be the same person on Sunday and Monday. So, as I always said, so
Well, I think that's important. Like your selection of books is great because, I mean, not because, you and I know each other through those organizations and whatnot, but to me, like, I read Good to Great before I read The Great Game and before I was exposed to Small Giants. And having been exposed to The Great Game and Small Giants changed who those people on the bus needed to be. So it's not that we were hiring the wrong people before. It's we were hiring for the company that we were at the time, and that wasn't the company who we needed to be. So, again, you said it without saying it, but I think it's important to figure out who you are as early on as you can, what you stand for, how you want to run this company, because this all ties together great with what you're talking about. Even if your clients are listening, I think if you have the right clients, because you're using the same philosophy to attract the types of people you want to work with, they'll be on board with this because they want to take care of their people too. And if we're all of the mindset of taking care of our people, the end result is, of course, going to be, that much measurably better than if we focused on the customer first. And you've probably in your journey had customers who abused your employees. And before you figure out who you are and what's important in that sliding scale, like if you choose your employees over your customers, if you have a customer that abuses your employees and you have that conversation, like, look, we're not tolerating this. Like, you either change the way you treat my people or we can't do business like effective right now. If you don't have those guideposts, if you don't know who you are and you're just all about the money and the contracts and growing the business, you lose sight of that, you're going to damage your people. And before you know it, the whole company, you talked about killing a company. That's a great recipe for doing it. Yeah. Put the client first, no matter who they are. Let them abuse your people and see how long that lasts.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So see, you had the right books. I mean, you had you've tied this all together. It's just, as I'm listening to you talk about it, I'm going, yeah, this is exactly how our journey was as well. I read the books in a different order. And it didn't click for me till later on of, oh yeah, the right people on the bus, what I considered a right person 10 years ago and what I consider a right person now are completely different because we're focused on those core value aspects. And you can teach skills, right? Like, I'm sure everything that you guys do there is teachable in terms of the process and the job itself, but you can't teach people how to behave or believe things. Like, they're intrinsically wired that way. So that, to me, I mean, those are great points for people just starting off in this journey.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we looked at like the people on the bus, and I think you're right. I mean, back when I read it, the company was a far different company. And so we would look at it and say, okay, our sales team needs to be money motivated, we need our ops people have to be hardworking, and so you're putting all these, all these terms to it, right? But now you would look at it and say, okay, when we're hiring people, some of the things that are really the most important is, do they believe in the system? Do they believe in what we're doing, right? Do they know what we're doing? Are they going to support it? Do they know what our core values are? And if they say, look, that's attractive, that's the reason why I'm coming there, is because those are the same core values that I have, that aligns perfectly, right? If they say, look, I want to work there, but my core values are different, then, I mean, that should be like a siren going off, a red light going off of like, well, that's going to be tough, right? They may be a great employee, but not a great employee for us.
I got a perfect example of that. Yeah. We were interviewing and we had a candidate in the room. This was obviously before this year because people were together in a room, but we're interviewing this person and we're talking about, it's like everybody's getting excited because, this person's excited and they're passionate about the way they talk about technology. And then, so I always ask the question, like that typical, where do you see yourself in like 3 or 5 years? But in the context, of the conversation was, where do you see yourself in our business in 3 to 5 years? And this person had their own agenda. They're like, oh my God, I can't wait to work for Oracle. Like, I want to be out. Like, and it just kind of stopped the whole conversation. Everybody's just kind of doing one of these. We're looking at each other and like, did they just say we're a stepping stone to get to Oracle? And then it was like a 3-minute Oracle fanboy conversation, you know, because you put nerds in a room and they start talking technology, then everybody gets excited about that. I'm going like, time out here. This person just said they don't want to be here in 4 years. Why would we waste the time training somebody up? And, you know, so it's interesting when that kind of stuff starts to lead. And I'm sure you've had similar instances where on the surface, the person, you know, gets excited about some things, but then you start peeling the onion back and it's like, yeah, they're just not a fit for who we are. And that's okay. I mean, there's a lot of smart people in our field in technology. They certainly wouldn't fit in our model. And I'm sure in your world too, you come across people who they're good people. I'd probably like to go have a beer with them, but certainly can't work with them or hire them.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, we definitely are finding that. In 19, we had a similar situation to you as we got down to 3 candidates as we were hiring another national account manager. And it was like, hey, this is really going to be tough between the 3. And the ladies that work at the office, I mean, they always say, well, we have an antenna that, you know, and so they were like, well, we didn't like that person just based on intuition. But really what it wasn't intuition. It was really that they could tell that the person, as they started to ask questions, it was the same sort of thing. Like, hey, in 2 years, you know, me and my wife are going to be moving, you know, and you know, at that point in time, you know, I'd like to be here and there. And that really wasn't kind of the culture of the company at the time. And so really their intuition was really more of the guidepost of they could tell that this person was not going to be in the foxhole, you know, when things got to a tough spot. They were really more committed to themselves than committed to others. And
Well, they're
so
just
we ended up
those
picking
signals up.
yeah. And so we ended up picking the candidates that that we could really tell that based on his core values that he was going to be a better fit. Maybe a longer ramp up, but that was okay because we're like, hey, you know, hire for attitude and teach the rest. You know?
Yeah.
And so that's it's interesting that we were kind of both on that same page.
Yeah. Well, I think that's just part of evolving as a leader. And, you know, and again, listening to the people that are in the room, like I've tried to remove myself from the hiring process. Like I didn't have a good track record of it. I want to believe everybody's a good person. Like, so, you know, I can make friends with just about anybody. So it's real easy for me to walk in a room, make people feel comfortable, have a conversation with them, and then get a false sense of, oh, wow, that went really well.
Yeah.
And when you put other people in the room and then you come out and you're expecting them to be like, oh, that was a great conversation. They're like, there's no way we're hiring that person. And you're like, why? And then they list like 5 or 6 things, just like you were talking about. Their antennas are up. They're picking up on these signals. And here I am just, you know, friendly having a conversation. I'm like, good. This is perfect example of why I'm not the smartest guy in the room and get me out of here.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, John, I've really appreciated you taking some time out of your day and having this chat and sharing your wisdom. You know, as this show goes on, I'd love to have you back and we can continue sharing the things that we learn. Hopefully we're getting smarter as we go too. And the grayer the hair gets, I had somebody on that says the grayer the hair gets, the higher the charge for my hourly service goes, because you're paying for the wisdom that I have. But if anybody wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to reach you and see if they can impart some wisdom?
So the best way, I'll give out my my phone. So that's 847-354-6114, or my email, which is the letter J Costello, which is COSTELLO at Cherry's End. That's CHERRYSIND as in dog.com.
Excellent.
Thanks, Eric.
And yeah, John, it's been a pleasure as always. We'll catch up soon, I'm sure. And thanks for joining us today. And ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate you listening on your journey. Stay safe out there. We hope this has been enjoyable, and tune in next week and we'll have another insightful guest on. I've been your host, Eric Rieger, and this has been Tempered Leadership. Take care.